The California sun cast golden light over the glamorous streets of Beverly Hills, where luxury cars lined the curbs and high-end boutiques like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and Chanel bustled with activity. Well-dressed shoppers carried designer bags, exuding wealth and privilege. Among them was Nathan Carter, a 38-year-old successful black businessman. Dressed in a tailored Armani suit, he stepped out of an upscale boutique, adjusting his cufflinks before sliding on his designer sunglasses. Nathan casually strolled across the private VIP parking lot, holding a Starbucks coffee in one hand and a shopping bag in the other. As he approached his shiny black 2023 Mercedes-Benz S-Class, he had no idea that within minutes he would become the target of a full-blown Karen meltdown. Nearby, Karen Thompson stood frozen, her jaw tightening as she observed Nathan. Karen Thompson, 42 years old, platinum blonde bob, oversized Gucci sunglasses, floral dress that looked outdated even for her age, gripped her Chanel handbag with one hand and her pink, glitter-covered iPhone 15 Pro Max with the other. As soon as she spotted Nathan unlocking the luxury vehicle, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "No way, Karen muttered, her entitled mind already jumping to the worst conclusion possible. Karen's thought process: a black man in Beverly Hills, standing next to a luxury car? He must be stealing it. Foreshadowing, Karen had no idea she was about to experience one of the most humiliating moments of her life. As Nathan casually opened the car door, a high-pitched scream tore through the air. "Stop right there!" Nathan paused mid-step, glancing over his sunglasses to see Karen storming toward him, heels clacking aggressively against the pavement. By now, several passers-by had started slowing down, some discreetly pulling out their phones. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen screeched, pointing at Nathan as if he were a criminal caught red-handed. Nathan raised an eyebrow, calm yet slightly amused. "Excuse me. Don't act dumb. I know you're trying to steal that car. Do you think I'm stupid?" Nathan took a slow sip of his coffee, completely unfazed. "And what exactly makes you think this car isn't mine?" Karen crossed her arms, scoffing loudly. "Oh, please. A guy like you driving an S-Class Mercedes? Yeah, right. You're probably an Uber driver or a scam artist." At this point, more people had gathered, whispering among themselves. Some were already recording. Nathan smirked slightly. Karen had no idea she was setting herself up for the biggest embarrassment of her life. Foreshadowing. She wasn't just insulting the owner of the car. She was about to humiliate herself in front of the world. Karen's voice grew even louder, drawing more attention. Pedestrians slowed their pace, some pretending to check their phones while secretly recording. Others openly stared, fascinated by the unfolding drama. "Someone call the police! A thug is trying to steal a car!" From a distance, a luxury Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly pulled into the parking lot. The car door opened, and out stepped Richard Thompson, Karen's husband, a wealthy businessman dressed in a crisp black suit. Karen's face lit up. "Honey, call the police. This guy is trying to steal a car." Security guard James Parker, a middle-aged white man, had been working at this lot for over a decade. He had seen too many entitled Karens throw tantrums like this. "Ma'am, I think you're making a big mistake." Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Mistake? Yeah, right. A guy like him owning a car like this? Please." Nathan smirked, crossing his arms. "And what exactly do you mean by a guy like me?" Karen let out a condescending laugh. "Oh, come on, a black guy in a designer suit driving a six-figure luxury car? Do I really need to explain why that's suspicious?" Richard finally stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. Karen turned to her husband, expecting him to take her side. "Honey, do something. This thug is trying to steal a car." But instead of reacting the way she expected, Richard suddenly smiled. "Nathan, I wasn't expecting to see you here." Karen froze. Her breath hitched. Her entire body stiffened. The crowd murmured in confusion. "Wait, you know him?" Karen stammered. Richard chuckled and extended a handshake toward Nathan. "Of course. Nathan Carter is the biggest shareholder in my company." Karen's face turned ghostly pale. The crowd gasped. Some people even started laughing. Nathan removed his sunglasses, smirking. "You were saying something about me not being able to afford this car?" Karen stood frozen, unable to speak. Foreshadowing. Karen had no idea her nightmare was just beginning. Karen stood frozen, but despite the overwhelming evidence, she refused to back down. Her face turned ghostly white, but within seconds, she quickly regained her entitled attitude. Crossing her arms, she shook her head in stubborn disbelief. No, no way. This has to be a mistake. Nathan smirked slightly, his sharp gaze unwavering. Should I show you my registration and proof of ownership? Or do you still want to call the police? Laughter erupted from the surrounding crowd. Many had their phones out, recording every second of Karen's humiliation. James Parker, the security guard, sighed before giving Karen a pitiful glance. Mrs. Thompson, I strongly suggest you stop before you embarrass yourself any further. Karen turned to Richard, her husband, desperately hoping he would support her. Honey, are you really going to let them lie to you like this? A guy like him can't possibly be the biggest shareholder in your company. Richard slowly removed his sunglasses, his expression unreadable. But when he spoke, his voice was ice cold. Karen, you just heard it from my own mouth. Nathan is not only my business partner, he's one of the biggest investors in our entire company. Karen's stomach dropped. The crowd erupted into gasps, some shaking their heads while others whispered among themselves. Plot twist forming. Karen wasn't just insulting a random black man. She was humiliating someone with more power than she could ever imagine. Karen gulped, but she still wasn't ready to admit defeat. No, there's no way. A man like him having that kind of money? That's impossible. Nathan raised an eyebrow, amused by her refusal to accept reality. You don't believe me? Fine. I can call my bank right now and let you hear my account balance if you'd like. Karen's entire body stiffened as the crowd burst into laughter. Now completely backed into a corner, Karen suddenly switched tactics. She bit her lip, lowering her voice, attempting to play the victim. I wasn't trying to be racist. I was just trying to protect our community. A young woman in the crowd scoffed. Protect the community? Or are you just mad that a black man is wealthier than you? The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Karen started breathing heavily. Her world was crashing down, but before she could say anything else, a commanding voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? Everyone turned toward the source of the voice. A uniformed officer was approaching, none other than Lieutenant David Reynolds, a respected local police officer and Richard's close friend. Karen's eyes lit up with newfound hope. Officer, oh, thank God, you have to help me. This thug is trying to steal a car. Lieutenant Reynolds narrowed his eyes as he looked between Karen and Nathan. But instead of reacting the way Karen expected, he suddenly smiled. Nathan, long time no see. Karen felt like she had been struck by lightning. Nathan chuckled and shook the officer's hand. David, I wasn't expecting to run into you here. Karen's mouth dropped open in shock. Foreshadowing, Karen's nightmare was far from over. Karen was frozen in place, realizing that the very police officer she had called for help was actually Nathan's friend. Lieutenant David Reynolds, a middle-aged white officer with neatly trimmed silver hair, greeted Nathan warmly, shaking his hand like an old friend. Still driving the S-Class, huh? I thought you'd have upgraded to a Maybach by now. Karen's face turned as white as a sheet. The crowd burst into laughter. Karen's eyes darted between Nathan and the officer, completely panicked. Wait, you two know each other? Lieutenant Reynolds chuckled. Of course. Nathan is one of the biggest sponsors of our precinct. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have gotten new patrol vehicles last year. Karen's stomach twisted into knots. Richard, her husband, sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. Karen, do you even realize what you've just done? Karen stammered, her confidence rapidly fading. I was just trying to look out for our neighborhood. I thought. Richard cut her off, his voice laced with disappointment. What did you think? That just because a black man is driving a luxury car, he must have stolen it? Karen had no response. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. A young man in a hoodie whispered to his friend, Damn, she really thought she could get away with this? A middle-aged woman shook her head in disgust. Typical Karen behavior. I bet this is going viral right now. Karen's breathing became uneven. She was losing control of the situation, and worse, her actions were now a public spectacle. Richard turned to Nathan, exhaling sharply. Nathan, I sincerely apologize for my wife's behavior. I had no idea she was capable of something this ignorant. Karen gasped. Richard, how can you say that? I'm your wife. You're supposed to be on my side. Richard's expression hardened. No, Karen, I stand on the side of what's right. You humiliated yourself today. And worse, you humiliated me. Karen's lip trembled. Tears welled up in her eyes. No, this is all just a misunderstanding. I was just trying to help. Nathan let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. Help? Karen, the only person you were trying to help was your own ego. Lieutenant Reynolds sighed, rubbing his temples. Nathan, do you want to press charges for harassment? There's enough video evidence here. Karen's heart stopped. No, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't deserve this. Richard looked at his wife, his voice now calm, yet ice cold. Karen, today you didn't just ruin your own reputation. You probably just ruined our marriage too. Foreshadowing, this was only the beginning of her downfall. Karen stood motionless, her mind spiraling into panic. Her husband had just said what she feared most. This wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. This was about losing everything. But her nightmare was far from over. Before Karen could process her husband's words, a deep, authoritative voice echoed from behind the crowd. What's going on here? The crowd parted slightly, and stepping through was a man Karen immediately recognized. James Whitmore, chairman of the board of Richard's company. Karen's entire body went numb. James Whitmore, a tall man in his early 60s, dressed in an impeccable navy blue suit, scanned the scene with sharp eyes. His gaze landed on Nathan. Nathan, I was just about to call you. We need to finalize the details for the upcoming investment deal. Karen's heart stopped. The murmurs in the crowd intensified. Wait, you know him? Karen stammered, voice barely above a whisper. James let out a light chuckle. Of course I do. Nathan isn't just an investor in Richard's company. He's one of the strategic partners of Whitmore Holdings. Karen felt her knees weaken. Richard turned to his wife, his disappointment now mixed with a deep, growing anger. Karen, do you understand what you've done? Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. The realization hit her like a truck. Nathan wasn't just some wealthy businessman. He had the power to decide the future of Richard's entire career. She hadn't just insulted a man. She had just ruined her husband's biggest business relationship. The crowd gasped again. A few even clapped, sensing the poetic justice unfolding. Karen turned desperately to Richard. Honey, please, you have to fix this. Richard's face remained expressionless. Fix this? How, Karen? By pretending you didn't just racially profile one of my most important business partners. Karen turned to James Whitmore, hoping for mercy. James, please, I didn't mean any of this. It was just a misunderstanding. James's face turned stone cold. A misunderstanding? Karen, what you did today didn't just embarrass yourself. It tarnished the reputation of everyone associated with you. Karen shook her head violently. Please, don't do this to me. James turned to Richard, completely ignoring Karen now. I think we need to schedule a board meeting first thing tomorrow morning. There are going to be some changes in leadership. Karen's world crashed down in an instant. Not only had she lost all credibility, but she had just destroyed her husband's standing in his own company. Richard didn't argue. He simply nodded, already knowing that his fate was sealed. Karen's breathing became erratic. She turned wildly, as if searching for someone to take her side, but no one did. Foreshadowing, Karen was about to lose much more than just her dignity. Karen's body trembled as reality finally set in. Her reputation, ruin, her marriage, on the brink of destruction. Her husband's career, in shambles because of her, and now, she was about to lose even more. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, and Karen could feel dozens of eyes burning into her. She tried to speak, tried to explain herself, but her voice came out weak and desperate. I didn't mean for this to happen. Nathan crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly. Didn't mean for what to happen, Karen? For you to get caught? Karen's lips quivered. The weight of her actions pressed down on her like a mountain. And then her phone buzzed. Karen instinctively pulled it out, her breath hitching as she saw dozens of notifications flood her screen. She tapped in one of them, and immediately her stomach dropped. Her entire meltdown had been recorded and was already going viral. Hashtags like #racist Karen, #Karen meltdown, and #justice served were trending. Videos of her screaming at Nathan had racked up hundreds of thousands of views in mere minutes. And the comments? This is the most embarrassing Karen moment I've seen in a while. Imagine ruining your husband's career because you're racist. She really thought she could get away with this? LOL. How's that karma tasting, Karen? Karen's vision blurred. The world spun around her. Her hands started shaking uncontrollably. Her life was spiraling out of control, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The very next day, Karen's nightmare worsened. As expected, her video had exploded across the internet. News outlets picked up the story. People started digging into her personal life. And then came the final blow. Karen received a cold official email from her company. She had been fired, effective immediately. The reason? Conduct unbecoming of an employee and damage to the company's public image. Karen dropped her phone onto the floor. She had lost her job. Her financial security was gone. Her marriage was barely holding on. And the whole world was celebrating her downfall. She tried calling Richard, but he wouldn't answer. She tried calling her friends, but no one wanted to be associated with her anymore. Karen was completely, utterly alone. For the first time in her life, she felt what it was like to be powerless. While Karen's world crumbled, Nathan's only got brighter. His name was trending for all the right reasons. News outlets praised him for how calmly he handled the situation. His company's stock even rose after the incident. Investors were eager to work with him. And the best part? He never even had to say a word. Karen had dug her own grave, and the world had simply watched. That was karma in its purest form. Days later, Karen sat alone in a tiny apartment she had rented after Richard filed for divorce. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to no one in particular, "I should have just kept my mouth shut." But it was too late. Some mistakes can be forgiven. Some can be corrected, but some will haunt you forever. Karen sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, staring blankly at the peeling walls. Her once perfect world had crumbled. The luxurious mansion, gone. Her designer wardrobe, sold just to pay rent. Her perfect image, destroyed beyond repair. She had lost everything. The phone in her hand vibrated with notifications, but she didn't need to look to know what they were. More hate comments, more reminders of her downfall. Everywhere she went, whether online or in public, people recognized her. Not as Karen Thompson, the wealthy wife of a businessman, but as racist Karen, the woman who tried to humiliate a black man and got destroyed instead. And now she was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a living, breathing example of how quickly karma could strike. While Karen sank into obscurity, Nathan's success skyrocketed. His company received more investors than ever. His reputation as a resilient, intelligent businessman only grew stronger. Even major news networks invited him for interviews, praising how gracefully he handled the situation. He never had to say much about Karen, because the world already knew. She had destroyed herself, and now she was nothing more than a forgotten chapter in his life. One evening, in a moment of desperation, Karen picked up her phone and dialed Richard's number. Her heart pounded as she listened to the ringing. Maybe, just maybe, he would forgive her. Maybe he would take her back. Maybe she could rebuild what she had lost. Finally, the call connected, but instead of Richard's voice, she heard an automated message. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Her breath hitched. Richard had changed his number. He had erased her from his life. Karen let the phone slip from her fingers, and for the first time, she truly understood. There was no coming back from this. Some people think they are untouchable, that their privilege will protect them, that they can get away with treating others unfairly. But karma has a way of balancing the scales, and sometimes, the fall from grace is steeper than they ever imagined. Karen thought she could humiliate a man for simply existing, but in the end, she was the only one left humiliated, because karma never forgets, and neither does the internet.